This is a Tabby and Tweed rigid heddle loom with all the accessories. The first step that you need to do is to decide which heddle to use for your project. If you're using an Aran weight, you would use a 6 EPI heddle. If you're using double knit yarn, you'd use an 8 EPI heddle, and if you're using 4 ply, you would use a 10 EPI heddle. To start, clamp the back of your loom to the edge of a table. At the other end, you need to have a warping peg or something which your warp can go around to be secured. So you may need to move the warping peg further than the end of the table. The rod is secured on the right as shown here with a piece of yarn which goes through the heddle. That just keeps this rod straight when you're warping. When you come to warp, you basically take a double thread through each of the slots and then take it over the warping peg at the other end of the table or wherever you have secured it. The thread will alternatively go under and then over the bar. Here you can see it's just gone under that bar and is now going through the slot on the heddle. Once we've measured all of the warp, we then need to transfer it to the back beam. So the warp threads are cut at the warping peg and chained in this way. The reason you chain it is that it creates a shorter length of warp, which is much easier to manage when winding onto the back beam. We need to use paper. Here I can see I've just folded over the top edge, which is exactly the same width of the back beam. This is really important that it spans the full width of the back beam. So I'm now winding on the warp, holding it tight in my left hand to get a really good tension and winding it tightly onto the back beam. Once I've wound on a little bit, I then put a piece of paper around the back beam just underneath the threads here, so that as I wind it on, the threads are then separated with each turn by a piece of paper, and this helps to create a really good tensioned warp. So here you can see that I'm putting in another piece of paper, and I will do this throughout the full length of the warp. Threading the heddles, through each slot there will be 2 threads, and you need to lift one of the threads up above the hole, put the threading hook into the hole and then pull the thread through, and this needs to be done right across the loom. Once the heddle has been fully threaded, the warp threads need to be tied onto the front bar. I usually do this in sections of about 2 or 3 centimetres wide. Just knot it on. I usually start in the centre, move to the outside edges and then fill in the gaps. The final step is to move the heddle up and down and check that there's a warp thread through each hole and slot. Before weaving, you will need to load some of your yarn onto the shuttle. I do this by taking the yarn around one of the outer prongs and then just taking it up and down the shuttle to load it on.